Hey, Leadville Racers, how are you? My name is Mike Iddings, and I'm the host of the YouTube channel Get My Buckle. This channel is all about Leadville, the race, the racers, the course, anything to do with Leadville. Today, my guest is one of the original badass endurance mountain bikers, adventurous, just great people. I'll give you a couple hints, see if you can guess. Great Divide Ride. Canaan. I did a sport. Extreme. Excuse me. And the Leadville Trail 100 winner, first year, 94. The original OG, John Stamstead. How are you, John? Good morning.
I'm great. Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
Oh, great. So I got a little nostalgic today. This is for you guys who don't know. Let's get the camera to focus. This is year one, the sweatshirt year one. This is what they provided with all the swag stuff, this backpack. They gave us this beautiful Rockport hat. And if you went into the Leadville store, they had, I guess this would have been 95, but this was the actual starting line of the 1994 Leadville Trail 100. They even had a helicopter that year. Do you remember the helicopter?
Yeah, I sure do. That was
Yeah,
zooming right in on me up at Columbine. That was very cool.
that was very cool. And we think, John and I talked a little bit beforehand, we're thinking the red jacket right there between the cars, second row, would be John. Just for reference, I am over here in the yellow jacket.
Nice.
This card has stayed intact, and we're going to keep it that way. Shoot, excuse me.
Yeah, that's very cool to have that memorabilia. Those are good memories from back in the pioneering days of endurance mountain bike racing.
Here's the race packet we got, and it had the map in it. I've even got the results and the time splits.
Nice.
Yeah, love it. Love going back. So, John, I mean, you were the adventurist. You were one of the extreme mountain bike pioneers. With the other things that you have done, which has seemed to be a little bit more extreme than Leadville, what got you to the point where you said, "Man, I heard about this 100-mile bike race, and I'm gonna go see what it's about."
I had heard about the running event, and like there's just good nostalgia about Leadville. I just thought it would be I guess I think I knew that it would be a marquee event. And I had lived in Summit County, Colorado in the late 80s. I did the ski bum thing after college. And every I think it was every Wednesday we would do a loop, around Vail Pass, Fremont Pass, through Leadville and around. So I was at least familiar with the area and just loved it. So it just worked out ideally for me. As soon as I heard there was a bike race, I signed up. I knew it would be cool, and I also thought it would be popular. That just seemed like a no-brainer. That would be a huge event at some point.
And it sure has transitioned into a huge event. Have you been following the like the growing pains with Lifetime?
Yeah, like all of UTMB too on the running side. Like as these the races get bought up and get condensed to the conglomerates, like that doesn't always go well.
Yeah, I think Lifetime, I think, has done a great job. You can see our little starting line. I don't know. I think 165 signed up, and maybe 150 actually started. Mm-hmm. Now we've got 1,800 on the starting line. and we're doing wave corrals where, 6:30 the gold and silver go, and then at 6:35 the red goes, and 6:40, and so they stagger the start, so we have 500-ish, 400-ish per wave,
Right.
which is quite different. Do you remember on that starting line, the weather was pretty crappy? What were you thinking for that day? Never, 100 miles, raining, Leadville, 10,000 feet, cold, 6 in the morning.
Yeah, starting, in the dark, like basically right at dawn. And as I recall, the temperatures were, high 30s or around 40. And we were staring at like dark, dark blue, black clouds. And everybody was super nervous. Like, are we just going to get pummeled like right at the start like that? It was already a daunting, race. And then, you think about like starting it just soaking wet and shivering, and like screaming down one of those descents when you're cold is like, that is not, I mean, it's not just uncomfortable, like that's hypothermic territory. And so everybody was very nervous.
Yeah, and I was too, there's no doubt. And with Leadville, the first 20 minutes, well, depending on where you're at, but first 15 to 20 minutes are downhill fast pavement.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're sitting there and it's drizzling and you are wet and you take off and you're just downhill screaming, I mean, my goodness, your hands get to the point where you can barely grab the brakes.
Right. And then just sitting at the starting line waiting for the race to start, you're getting cold because you can't be overdressed. So it was tricky to figure out what clothing to start in, and then like what you could drop. And it's just the little things that have a massive impact on a race like that.
So if you were going to give some advice to the 2024 racers and it's raining at the start, what would your advice be to them?
Well, clothing is a lot better these days than it was then. Back in the day, I would carry folded up squares of saran wrap that I could either, unfold and put around my knees, or just stick in the front of my shorts to keep my quads warm. And I started with a trash bag, in my shorts to keep my glutes warm. Because, like, I don't think people emphasize enough, cold muscles do not work well. Like, it's not just, can you, get through the cold? Like, most people can get through it, but can you get through it and be fast? And, keeping, a homeostasis of your temperature, I just think is, critical. And so that means you've got to be able to add and remove layers that you can carry. Like, just the logistics are hard. Nowadays, a waterproof jacket is small enough you can stick it in your jersey pocket. So, that's kind of a no-brainer. And knee warmers are great because you can, pull those on and off, reasonably quickly.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've done this race a lot, and knee warmers are just, I don't even take them off anymore, because the weather changes so dramatically, so quickly, and so often. Start with them on, get to the point where I'm warm, pull them down to, just knees. Weather changes, pull them up, don't even get off the bike, don't even break stride. Just do that. I do like the I do like the old school saran wrap trick though. That's just awesome. I mean, I remember the garbage bags from watching, some old cycling shows, but the saran wrap under the shorts is pretty cool.
Yeah, saran wrap, and then carrying surgical gloves, which are very good in cold rain as well. Those have saved me a number of times.
And you just put them right over your gloves, right?
Yep.
Right over the, yep. Don't
It
take
works like a vapor barrier. Like, they're not good for cold, dry conditions, because obviously you're going to sweat inside there, but for cold rain, they're perfect.
Nice. Yeah. And something else that I've incorporated, I think one of the first years I stayed in a hotel, and I actually brought the shower cap from the hotel.
Yep.
And we got it, and I put the shower cap right over my visor, right over my helmet. I can still breathe a little bit, but yet the water sheds off. And if your collar on your coat's up, it won't go down your back. So that shower cap is a really good idea for, you guys coming out, put that in your whatever your little rain preparation gear for Leadville is, keep it in that. And if it gets to that point, you're gonna be glad you had that.
Yeah, and even like a little trash bag, just sticking it up under the front of your jersey can really keep you warm on the fast descents, and then you can just pull it out. So that's pretty effective too, as a kind of a low rent vest windbreaker.
Low rent. Back in the day, that's what we had.
Yeah,
I love it. So do you remember going out on your first Leadville? You remember, were you guys in a group? Did you have other guys, with you working together? Was it just, you took off and see you later?
I remember there was one Leadville local who just went out insanely fast, like way too fast. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way anybody can ride this fast for 100 miles. So I didn't think much of it, but it was challenging because I think I had maybe done 100-mile race, before that, maybe two. So, it's hard to know like what pace we can hold, like what heart rate. We didn't have power meters then, but so you're looking at heart rate. It's like, okay, what heart rate do I think I can hold? What's reasonable? Because I think it does. I mean, you can't start too far back if you're trying to do well, because it's hard to pass people. But you also, like, I think the biggest mistake most people make is, you're all energized, you're gung ho psychologically, and you're super rested. Like everybody's more rested than they normally are. So your legs just don't feel any pain. So you can be, just cruising and thinking, oh my gosh, I feel perfect. Like nothing, it doesn't feel hard when you're all that, have that much adrenaline. But then an hour later, you've cooked yourself. So I think you really have to just lower it down. You should be able to go a lot harder than you are. And you can, even if you fall back further than you want to, you can make up for it with the people who are falling apart at the end of the ride. Just, I think it's much more important to think about that whole duration, not where you are on the first climb.
Oh, for sure. It's a long day.
Mm-hmm.
Long day, a lot of climbing, a lot of miles. So yeah, there's burning matches is a highly used term.
The other issue that happens when if you go out too fast is you burn up all your glycogen, and then so I think like it's pretty common for people to have stomach issues in these longer, harder events. And part of the reason that happens, I mean, people tend to blame it on their food. If you bonk or come close to bonking, and then not only do you have to start eating, but you've got to try and reload your glycogen. You're eating twice as much as you should be. So it's this huge load on your digestive system while your blood is competing to go to your legs. And so I think that creates a lot of problems. Whereas if you go out slower and then just make sure you eat, that first hour, second hour, like whatever your system is, know your body, and just be eating, from the start, not waiting until, it's too late.
Right. And do you do preparatory, eating? Do you eat special things, 3 days before the race?
No, I mean, you do want to, like maybe lower the fiber, just so you're not carrying anything, extra the morning, of the ride, or, like have to go to the bathroom, 2 hours in, like that's bad. It's one of those logistics that not everybody thinks about, but I did. I altered my diet just to make sure there's not an extra load in there.
Well, interesting. Well, power to weight, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought of that part of the power to weight ratio, but it all adds up.
Every little bit matters, that's can be a pound, and people will pay anything to take a pound off of their bike frame.
Isn't that the truth? Do you remember what bike did you ride back then? You remember?
That would have been a Ritchie P20, I think, with an Alls.
26ers, cantilever brakes.
Yep, with an Allsop stem. Yeah, I probably had cantilevers, not V brakes. Um, it was a good bike. I liked it a lot. It handled really well.
Nice. And that
I
was a
think
hard
modern
film,
bikes
maybe?
are modern bikes are, significantly, lighter, faster, kind of everything better. But at the time I felt like I had a top level bike.
Well, for sure. Were you sponsored then?
Yeah, I was riding for Team Ritchie that year.
Nice. Nice. Um, for you, was Columbine the toughest climb? Was Powerline the toughest climb? Do you recall?
I think coming back Powerline maybe, although it's interesting how courses change over time. That first year, it was really technically challenging. Like going up Columbine, I remember that last section being all baby head rocks. And then,
Still is.
when I went out there a few years later, like it'd been tracked out pretty well. And I just thought it was, a few sections of it were a lot less technically demanding. I mean, the mountain bike trails change over time, of course, but I thought that first year it was especially challenging.
Well, and I would think that, with the rain that we had back then, it washes out the dirt between the rocks and definitely makes it, that's one of the elements that can definitely change the course.
Mm-hmm.
And I I remember Powerline being so rutted that if you weren't on the crest of the high points and you slid into the drainages, I mean, they
Right,
might be 3 feet deep.
right. Yeah, those were pretty vicious looking.
Right? And coming and climb and trying to climb back up Powerline and having to be on those ridges. I mean, you had to be a technically skilled rider to be able to do that. That is for sure.
Yeah, and then like it was, tire technology then wasn't what it is today. So we were all trying to have the lowest rolling resistance, tires. And I spent a lot of time on that because I just thought that was one of the biggest, forces that were under my control to try and reduce. And I think it was the Ritchie, not the Z Max. Can't remember what they called it, but it was a semi-slick tire that was pretty darn slick. Like it was basically a fire tread in the center. And one day in training, I was out on the course, and one of the sections, I just touched my front brake on some of that loose sand that's on a hard um, uh, underlying layer, and like my front wheel washed out, and I just went sailing over the bars. So it was really hard to like figure out, like, you want to have a fast bike, but you also don't want to end your race with a crash because there just wasn't enough traction.
Oh, right. And tires. I mean, there's a Facebook page, Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike participants page. When somebody asks a question regarding tires, oh man, look out. There's going to be 900
Yes.
comments and arguments and opinions. And I had a show with Dave Weens, and we were talking about his tires. And he said back then, they were just starting to, I think it was 2006, 7-ish, 8, something like that. They were just, they weren't tubeless yet, but they were taking regular tires and making them tubeless.
Mm-hmm.
And they were at 17 psi, and
Right.
his tires were they had little tiny clover, the knobbies were in the shape of clovers, and they were, I mean, 2 millimeters thicker, stood out from the tire itself. I mean, they were almost snake bellies. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what he said. The same thing. He said, man, he said these tires were fast, but you had to be really careful with them in the corners because they were not. That's not what they were designed for.
Yeah,
They were designed
exactly.
for high speed back in the day. Excuse me. So what, power line, do you remember, did you climb power line? Did you hike it?
I hiked a section. I have always had issues with sciatica, and it just kind of locks up my legs. It doesn't, I don't have pain from it, but it reduces my power. Like those muscles just get tight and I don't get the nerve flow. And the best treatment for it is running stairs. So I would run stairs a lot as training. But so the closest thing to running stairs is like power hiking, like taking those, deep, long strides. And I found that I was much faster overall if I could, run a few sections and stretch out that, part of my body. I could pedal a lot faster. So I always looked for those sections to, intentionally get off the bike. I thought it was
Wow.
faster. I tried it both ways in training, and that just seemed better for me.
Huh. Interesting that hiking actually improves your cycling.
Yeah, it's just the way that my, muscles are, situated. They can, if I spend too much time riding, they just kind of tighten up on me on the sciatic area, the piriformis.
Well, and you
Uh,
spend a lot of time riding. So you
yeah,
must have to deal with that a lot.
yeah, it was a huge, huge issue for me. Like, you can't really cure sciatica. You just kind of manage it, as best you can. So it was a uh, challenge that I had to deal with. Also, that was another part of the reason I would put the trash bag in my shorts is to do like heat treatment. So that would, I superheat that area and get those muscles to loosen up, and then I'd, pull the bag out and uh,
Huh.
be better.
Interesting.
So it was, yeah, I was always kind of tinkering and trying to figure out how best to deal with that. And then um, 94 also, I had a bad crash at the 24 hours of snowshoe, and I had major neck problems. Um, so I was dealing with that. Like I couldn't, that last descent before coming into town, I was petrified that I was going to get caught because I couldn't look behind me. That's how tight my neck was. So I just had to like go as hard as I could and kind of pray. So it was stressful. Like I didn't didn't have a GPS, so didn't know like exactly how far I had left to go. And
Wow. Well, here's something for the first timers. Even the front of the pack, the fastest guy for 94, he's got to dig deep because he's got a neck issue coming down St. Kevin and can't look behind him. You know, wow. And did you have like hot spots in the neck and it was firing, or the mobilization was limited?
yeah, that summer, like after that crash, I didn't go for a single training ride over 5 hours because as soon as I would get to about that point, it would just lock up on me. Um, uh, and then so like about the 5 hour point of that race, it just got super tight, and then I just lost mobility.
Wow.
Didn't seem, I don't think it affected my legs at all. It was just extremely uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, uncomfortable, and you can't look to see if anybody's coming up on you.
And it's just harder to descend when you can't get your full field of view. You kind of have to pick a line and then just kind of try and stick with it.
Huh. Well, I'm going to check here. I see that you finished 7:52, and Christopher Miller finished in 8:11. So what's that? 8 and 11. It's night. So you had a 19-minute lead. So you didn't have to worry about it too much.
No, but you never know that,
Right.
or
Do you
even if,
remember?
like, I think I got splits from a motorcycle camera crew. But I've learned from other races, people who give you splits like are often wrong, and you're better off just going, like, nowadays you could pull up, I would imagine most people have a GPS transponder. You can follow the race on, is it on track leaders or something? Can you see where riders are? I haven't looked lately.
they get, what they do is they get text updates when they cross the timing mats. So the
Ah,
timing mats are positioned at certain points along the course. And when your number plate's got the the transponder in it. So when you cross the timing mat, it will notify whoever that signed up for text results. Hey, he crossed Twin Lakes, he crossed, the Goat Trail, he crossed, Power Line, whatever.
mhm.
So they can monitor when they cross the timing mats. And then I think if you brought your phone and had your iPhone tracking on, and if you were in the right cell coverage piece of the course, your crew could probably figure it out
Right.
from that as well. But I don't think there's live tracking every foot of the course.
Gotcha.
Uh, do you remember the Boulevard coming home?
Yeah, it was awesome. And that, like, I'd been doing at that time a lot of, more wilderness, type events. So the finish lines were like a couple of people maybe, or sometimes just yourself. Because it was still a pretty obscure sport, at that time. So coming down to, cheering crowds is one of the coolest experiences you can have as a human being. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that. And gosh, I remember, I mean, there were what, Sixth and Harrison. I mean, there were definitely people there. But now, have you seen any of the footage from, the
Oh yeah.
finishes
Yeah.
nowadays?
It's crazy. It's like a tour stage,
Yeah.
which is
Have you
fun. It's
seen?
great that people, support the race.
Oh, absolutely. Have you seen Twin Lakes aid station? I mean,
No.
oh my goodness. Well, the entire length of the dam are tents on both sides and spectators on both sides for that entire stretch, which has to be a couple hundred yards.
Right.
And I mean, it is a madhouse, and people are closing in because they're
Hmm.
looking for their rider, and they're grabbing the last things, or they're borrowing stuff from the tent across there. And I mean, what a mess. I mean, you have to be super careful going through Twin Lakes, that's for sure.
That's
And
great.
then yeah, coming home when you hit the red carpet, that is a good feeling. So do you see yourself doing Leadville again?
Um, I wouldn't rule it out. Um, uh, it would certainly be fun. Like maybe after I turn 60, in a couple of years, I think it'd be fun to, do some of these, events. Um, uh, yeah, I miss it. It's a just a cool, like, everything about it. The town is awesome. Like I just like the whole atmosphere. It was just really fun to be a part of that community. So I would definitely look at that, doing it in the future.
If you do come back, what bike are you going to be riding?
I don't know. I've been mainly riding, a gravel bike. I've got a bolt cutter gravel bike that I like a lot, and I don't really ride, any differently. I kind of ride like I did. I ride the same trails that I did on a, 90s, hardtail. Um, and it works fine, but yeah, I'd probably do just a nice light 29er hardtail.
29. Any idea what you'd run for gearing?
No, I'd really have to look into that with the, like the 29er wheels. Like that's probably the biggest benefit that has changed over time is all of the gearing options. Because I think that too was a mistake. Like when I lived in Colorado, I rode all of those passes on a 4219 or a 4221, on the road, low gear, which is just crazy. It makes no sense whatsoever. You're so much. I learned as soon as I got a power meter that as soon as you can spin, ride a lower gear and spin, the power output that you can maintain is way higher up those long climbs. Um, so I would probably find the easiest, gear that I could get on a bike. That power line coming back is pretty steep. I don't know how we did it with the gears we had back in '94.
Well, we had 3 chain rings to choose from, right?
Yeah, but didn't have a 52 pie plate, in back either.
Yeah. You ever pay attention to Keegan and his gearing or Lachlan and his gearing for Leadville?
No, I don't think I've looked at their gearing. What do they run for low gear?
Last year, Keegan broke the course record at 5:43, and he was running a 40 up front. And I think he had a 10:51 in the rear, 10:51 or 10:52. I don't know exactly which it was. And Lachlan told me that he was running a 42 up front.
Wow.
So when I think of that up Columbine and Powerline, it's like, there's just no way for me.
Yeah, they're motoring.
They're motoring. So in John's heyday, take that, put that with all of today's technology. What do you think? What would your prediction be time-wise in Leadville?
Oh, I have no idea. Like, I know the people who did it the first year and then did it, like a few years later, it looked like the course got an hour faster. Like Lori Brandt, the women's winner that first year, she did it an hour faster a few years later. I know like couple of those sections have been paved, so I think the course has gotten slightly faster. I'm way slower, obviously, with 30 years older. I'd be hoping just to finish, these days.
Yeah, the course has made quite a bit of changes. They've had private land issues they've had to work around and relocate the course. And then with the advancement of technology and speed, the front guys were passing or were so far ahead that they were passing the last riders at different sections of the course. So they were single track. So they've rerouted some of that. And do you remember the north face descent, or they might call it, Clavicle Hill, that super steep section on your way to Twin Lakes?
Yeah.
Well, we don't take that up anymore. We don't take it down. We do a single track around that now. And last year they made a change where we don't even come up the single track. We go farther up the pavement and come up a different draw. So the advancement of, the technology, which makes the front guys so much faster, has kind of altered the course as well. So, and even at the top,
that's the cool thing of mountain bike races in general is they evolve and they change over time. I think that's one of the the most fun aspects. It's different every year depending on conditions. Like, it can be, if it's super dry, it can be sandy. If it's somewhat wet, it can be tacky and incredibly fast. All those variables make it interesting.
Right. And let's see, I think last year was they also, before you'd hit Columbine and you'd summit, but then you would descend down to the halfway point. And then you'd have to climb back out of the halfway point to the summit and then take off back down again. And they have eliminated that down section. And at the summit is actually where you turn around now. So that part's a little bit, you definitely save some time there, but because of some private land issues now at the bottom of Twin Lakes, we have to take some dirt roads down farther, climb up the dirt road a lot longer. So the part of that evolution is, I don't know, I guess it's bittersweet. It's you've added some spots, added some distance on the course. We've taken some of it away at the high point. That's not all bad, right? Getting down off 12,006 quicker.
Right. I would imagine like the increase in people makes it harder. Like, passing people is challenging and sometimes dangerous.
Yep. Do you have issues with elevation?
I guess, well, I've done well at it. So I mean, maybe less than other, like, it's always hard. I tried, back in the day, what technology we had to prepare for altitude. I tried various methods. I don't know that any of them, worked. I tried to get there 3 weeks before. I tried getting there just a couple of days before. I mean, now, like if you're a super serious, competitor at that kind of altitude, like you probably have an altitude tent in your house, or, other, mechanical contraptions. And I think that, makes a pretty massive difference.
Right.
Or
'Cause
you
there's,
live at altitude, one of those options.
yeah, the living at altitude is definitely an advantage because
Mhm.
with the popularity of Leadville, I mean, people are coming from all over the world and all different elevations and plenty of flatlanders at sea level. And that's the unknown for Leadville. I mean, weather's one thing, but no one knows what their body's going to do at 12,000 feet until they actually get there and are stressing and are, revving their heart rate and holding it and just turning themselves inside out.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on your natural physiology. Some people have, develop like altitude sickness, even at, those altitudes, which aren't, I mean, they're high, but it's not crazy high. And I never had, anything other than, I think for people coming from sea level, I think probably the hardest thing is the dry mouth. They're not used to breathing dry air, and that is so uncomfortable. And that is like, I think that is a major, challenge, or it's just like it's so out of their norm, um, that they should be well prepared for that.
Right. And regarding fueling, are you a packaged food guy or are you a real food guy?
For a ride like that, I would for sure do energy gels. I
Yeah.
did goo. I probably did goo the entire way on that. It's energy gels are by far the most efficient fuel that you can use. Like it just in my experience, after events got longer than 12 hours, I couldn't take them any longer, and I would have to switch to a different type of fuel. Um, but if you try and get, like a good ballpark figure is, roughly 300 calories of carbohydrate an hour. You can be different people have digestive systems that can tolerate more or less, but a big problem that people had back in the day was we weren't aware that there was a limit of how much carbohydrate your digestive system can process in an hour. And so people would be attempting to eat like 600 calories of carbohydrate, because they needed the calories, they needed the fuel, but your system can only digest and process, in the 300 calorie range. So all of those extra calories you're putting in are just overloading your system, and then you develop, a digestion problem. And again, like it's not specifically whatever food you were eating; it's just the quantity, and that's why you need to start, fueling right away so you don't build up that huge deficit and have to try and overload because it's just so hard on your body to do that.
Right. And my coach told me that the percentage of people that don't finish, 80% of that number are GI issues, which
Mm-hmm.
I was really surprised at that.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I mean, the food products we have now are a lot better in terms of sodium, because I think sodium is another factor for people developing stomach issues. Like their system shuts down and they can't digest, and the cause can be low sodium. Like if you look at sweat has about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per liter, and most of these energy drinks, especially the ones that we had 30 years ago, had maybe 200 or 300 milligrams of sodium. So that the math doesn't math on that one. It's in hot years, and people's your burn rate of sodium is different. So you need to learn what your sodium sweat rate is, and then find a product. Like I've been using this drink called Element, LMNT, and it has 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet. And I use one of those per 20-ounce water bottle. And that works for me, but I have, kind of high sodium needs. So I think individuals need to figure out theirs, but in general, like during the event, more is better. And trust your system. Like if you're craving salt, like make sure you get salt in.
Right. Have you ever used, do you have to use salt tablets or anything like that? Or did you, I guess?
No, because I think so. The other problem with electrolytes is you can go the other direction and overload them. And that can cause, some of the similar problems. Like it was not uncommon for people to spend the 3 days before an event overloading their electrolytes. And then they get to the event and they're bloated and their body can't process any fluid. Because if it drains, if you're so loaded with electrolytes and you start sweating out fluid, then that concentration of the electrolytes in your system increases. So your body doesn't want to do that. So like all bad things happen. So like, I guess I tried to stay, as normal as possible leading up to the event, not overloading either fluid or electrolytes. And then during the event, I would take a pretty high dose. Although that, like, I didn't know that like in that time frame in the 90s. And I can look back at races where I did poorly, and now I can see it's like, oh, I was totally low on sodium, and we didn't know that then. We didn't have that knowledge.
Do you ever fight cramps?
No, I would never have cramps because of low sodium. And again, like cramping, people blame sodium for cramping, but generally speaking, like cramps can be caused by a number of reasons. But the main one is you just tapped out your muscles. Like they just can't do anymore. It's not an imbalance. It's just you did too much, too early.
Yeah. For me personally, I would cramp. I would cramp at Leadville. It could have been on power line inbound, and it seemed like year after year I would start to cramp a little bit sooner in the race. And some of my stuff was coronary artery disease. I ended up having blockages. I had stents installed, so we're thinking that blood flow was part of it for me.
Right.
But my answer was Thermotabs, and I would take which is a buffered salt tablet. I would take 2 or 3 of those. When I felt the cramp coming on, I would take 2 or 3 of those, and I wouldn't even have to get off my bike. That cramp would just dissolve. And by the time I got those pills in, but then I would have to eat 2 or 3 of those every hour until the race was over. And I might eat 20 in a race. But it would definitely keep the cramps at bay, and I was able to, ride and not have them again.
Right.
Which was,
I think
thank goodness.
I remember reading a study where hot sauce could mitigate cramping. Like it just kind of, shocks your system, and then your muscles, work again. I mean, it's not some permanent fix, but I remember carrying hot sauce packets just in case, that did happen like late in a race, cramping because they're tired, but like just to get that last, little bit out of them, just pop some hot sauce packets.
Interesting. Cool. Now they have Hot Shot, right? You've heard of Hot Shot?
No.
Oh, it is a cramp, supposed to be the answer to cramps. Hot Shot, which is a very hot, it's like hot sauce. It's just the viscosity is more like just a drink.
Right. Huh.
It's called Hot Shot. Yeah.
Interesting.
No, cramps are always a big question mark for everybody, because they get them at different points, and the answer is probably different for a lot of different people.
Yeah, it was weird for me. Cramping correlated with like really good efforts, because that meant if my legs cramped, it means that I was able to get to the point where I got every last ounce out of my legs. And it was usually like just at the end, and then I would just have to like try and get through that last, stretch with it. But that was a marker for me, like a really good performance, oddly.
Huh. Great. Do you still have your buckle?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple of them.
Nice.
Very cool. Yeah. I treasure those. There's a nice little, and then, uh, Ken gave me like one year I came back and they gave me one with my name on it, and it's a little bit bigger too. So that's kind of cool.
It wasn't the 10, it wasn't the 1,000 mile buckle, was it?
No, I think they just gave me one in recognition of, you know, um, being there at the first couple of years of the race. It was very generous of them.
That's super cool. No, they Ken and Marilee are just awesome people. They're just awesome.
Oh, hold on, I might have it.
Well, while he's looking for his, there's mine.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I see it. Ha.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, and then if you do 10 of them, I got 10 in before the logo changed.
Very cool.
Very cool. Very cool. I wear mine every day. I got my buckle on. But all right, John, it was super cool of you to take the time out of your day. Really appreciate it. Any other last minute advice for, the newbies coming?
I think I think there's a proper mindset that is probably more important than anything, in terms of um, finishing, these types of, super hard, events. There's a concept called dopamine reward prediction error. And if you have a set goals, like especially an event like, Leadville, it's pretty easy to have exact checkpoint goals for time that you want to hit, each, checkpoint. And that is awesome. And it's good, conventional success theory if you're making, your goals. The problem comes in when you start not making those goals. And that can lead to, literal physical, depression. You get really down on yourself. And in reality, you might not be hitting those goals because the course is harder. Maybe it is a rain year, or it's, sandy, or, whatever it is. So I think you're much better off going into it without micromanaging those goals, and just have the attitude of, I'm going to do my best, the whole way. Go out, in at a moderate level, and then just do your best, and take your splits as they come, and just have confidence that you're doing everything that you can, and the result is going to be whatever the result is. And I think that leads to better performances, and often more satisfaction in the overall event. You'll be, if you all you can do is your best, and you will end up wherever you deserve to end up based on your training and the day of the race.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's gonna be a hard sell with the time cutoffs at Twin Lakes and Pipeline, and the computer and all the splits on the web, and oh my goodness, there's so much angst
Mm-hmm.
that comes with everybody's got all this data now. They've
Right.
got all these yardsticks to use to measure, and I think that would be a hard sell. I think it's a great advice. Just get in, start, and go, and just do your best.
Oh, and I think also, just in terms of metrics, if you're training with either, or racing with either a power meter or a heart rate monitor, like, know what you're physically capable of, And don't think that on the day of the race, you're going to do 20% better than that. Like stay within, practical means and try and, run somewhat level splits in terms of, your effort. You'll end up doing way better that way than going out, way too hard and digging yourself a hole.
which many people do, right?
It's like more than half. Like it's the most common mistake is, if you can, climb at, 300 watts and then, come day of the race, you're, going up that first climb at 350 plus or whatever your, number happens to be. You will pay for that just later on.
You will pay for that for sure. Yeah, I know that. So there's a lot of discussion regarding power meters and using those for a not to exceed number for the race day.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's how you should use a power meter, is keep it below, X, and whatever X is for you. If it's, climbing pace of 200 watts or 250 or regardless, like know what your number is and be honest about that number, and then, don't go over, because there's no free lunch. You're not magic.
No free lunch.
Well, no, I remember back in the day before we had these tools, like you always thought, well, maybe I'll just have a magical day. I'll go out hard and maybe I can just hang, with the, group that you don't normally, hang with. And you could delude yourself with that because there was no piece of evidence telling you that you couldn't. It's like maybe the training, worked out, or the resting, or, whatever it is. But, the best thing about power meters is they tell you, what you can do. The worst thing about power meters is like they tell you what you can do. And you have to accept your reality and then do your best, within that.
Yeah. And, another variable in there is going to be whatever the decrease is in your power for the elevation. So you need to factor that in as well, because if you need to get there and, whatever your climbing number is, go do St. Kevin and figure out what that new number is going to be, because your new number, your Leadville number, is going to be different than your sea level number for sure.
Significantly less. Yeah, I'll bet that's a common issue there too. Coming from sea level and then trying to ride your, at-home power numbers gets people into trouble.
Right, because they're not going to be the same. I mean, they are just not going to be the same. And some people are 20%, some people are 25, some people are 10. You just don't know until you do it. And you're going to have to, it would help you if you could figure that out before the race so that you could set that new don't exceed number to make your day better. Well, great advice. I love it. I think the viewers are going to, I'm sure a lot of them are going to be making some adjustments in, in their head, right? If whatever my number is, I got to make sure when I get there, I change that number so that I'm going to have a day, a consistent day of racing.
Yeah. And you'll feel a lot better, coming into the finish. I think if you listen to yourself and ride within, your ability.
Sure. All right, John. Thanks, you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
No, pleasure to have you. It was an honor. Year 1, 1994 inaugural Leadville Trail 100 winner, John Stamstead. Have a good night.
Good times.
All right, viewers, just want to remind you, we have aligned with CTS, Carmichael Training Systems. They're offering, they're waiving the athlete registration fee if you use the code GetMyBuckle. And Bird Wheels, the rope spoke carbon hoop, super comfortable, super light wheels. They're offering 10% if you use the code Bird Buckle 2024. So thanks again. Hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you at the finish line.